The honeymoon was supposed to be the perfect start to their new life. Elliot and Lisa, newlyweds from New York, chose sunny Miami to celebrate the beginning of their marriage. They stayed in a luxury hotel by the ocean, with a balcony that overlooked the turquoise waves. Elliot organized this vacation to the smallest detail, because he wanted everything to be perfect. He dreamed of romantic walks, candlelit dinners, and days filled with their shared love. For him, it was the first step into a future he saw as cloudless and happy. Lisa, with her energy and charisma, has always been the life of the party. She could easily find a common language with anyone, and Elliot adored that about her. But at the same time, her irrepressible nature hid a secret. Her inability to control her desire to be the center of men's attention. Her desire to flirt and meet new people was stronger than she was, and even now, in marriage, this passion did not fade. She had never told Elliot about this part of herself, afraid of losing his love. But on their honeymoon, this problem was to become apparent. When they arrived at the hotel, Elliot was delighted. The luxurious light-filled room overlooking the ocean seemed like the perfect place for them to make love. Lisa also looked happy, but her eyes occasionally lingered on the hotel staff, men who helped with luggage or offered drinks. Elliot didn't pay any attention to this, attributing her behavior to her usual sociability. The first day went flawlessly. They spent time on the beach, swimming in the warm waves and enjoying cocktails. Lisa looked adorable in her brightly colored swimsuit, and Elliot caught admiring glances from other men. He felt proud that this beautiful woman was now his wife. But by the end of the day, Lisa began to behave a little strangely. She left her phone on silent and from time to time disappeared in an unknown direction, excusing herself by saying she wanted to take a walk or admire the sunset. Elliot did not suspect anything wrong. The next day, Elliot noticed that Lisa had become overly interested in the hotel parties. She insisted that they go to the bar, where they were having a theme night. Elliot, although not a big fan of such events, agreed because he wanted to make Lisa feel good. At the party, Lisa quickly became the center of attention. She danced with enthusiasm, laughed, and communicated easily with other guests, especially the men. Elliot watched this with a little discomfort, but talked himself into not being jealous. Returning to the room late at night, Lisa seemed to be in a great mood. Elliot tried to talk to her about how the evening had gone, but she quickly changed the subject, saying that you have to live in the moment. Tired and a little puzzled by her behavior, Elliot fell asleep, not even realizing what was happening behind his back. The next day, Lisa said she wanted to spend some time alone. She explained that she needed to recharge after the stress of the wedding. Elliot, being an understanding man, agreed, although he began to have doubts. She returned only in the evening, making the excuse that she had gone for a spa treatment. But when Elliot asked her to go out to dinner, she looked confused, like a person hiding something important. That night, Elliot noticed something even more suspicious. When he was trying to find his shirt, he accidentally came across a man's bracelet in her suitcase. He was surprised by this, but Lisa quickly explained that it was a gift from my mom that she had accidentally brought with her. Elliot felt that something was wrong, but decided not to focus on it. The fourth day of the honeymoon was a turning point. Elliot began to notice that Lisa was constantly looking at her phone. Her face expressed mixed emotions. Sometimes she looked happy, and sometimes she was clearly nervous. When Elliot asked her if she was okay, she said she was just checking the news. But when he accidentally saw a message from an unknown number on her screen, Lisa quickly locked her phone and went to the bathroom. Later that day, they went to dinner at the hotel restaurant. There, Lisa was extremely friendly with one of the waiters, who returned to their table several times, although there was no need for him to do so. Elliot felt uncomfortable, but decided not to make a scene. Instead, he decided to observe her behavior more closely. The next morning, he told Lisa that he was going to visit a local museum and asked her to come along. She refused, explaining that she wanted to stay in her room and read a book. But when Elliot left the hotel, he did not go to the museum. Instead, he stayed nearby to keep an eye on the room. His heart beat faster when he saw Lisa leave the room 20 minutes after he left and head to the hotel bar. There, she sat down at a table with a man Elliot recognized as one of the party guests from a few days earlier. Elliot went back to the room, but this time he left the hidden camera behind to find out the truth. He felt that the solution to all of this was close, and he wanted to know if his suspicions were justified. The camera was to be his last argument in solving this mystery. Elliot couldn't find a place to sit. He felt that something was happening behind his back, and every glance Lisa gave him, her unexpected excuses and disappearances only confirmed it. But he wanted to be sure before he made any conclusions. That evening, after returning to the hotel, Lisa seemed too calm for someone who had spent the day in her room. She talked about an imaginary day, recounting details that didn't add up. Elliot remained silent, but his suspicions grew. The next morning, Elliot checked the hidden camera he had installed the day before. He shivered as he opened the files on his laptop. As he watched the footage, he saw what he feared most. Lisa had brought a man to the room whom he recognized from the party at the bar. They sat next to each other, chatted, and then the camera captured them hugging and disappearing from view. That was the moment when Elliot's world began to crumble. Everything he believed in love, trust, their future seemed fake. He could not keep silent any longer. The next night, he decided to confront her, but he wanted to be prepared. Before arranging the conversation, he gathered all the evidence, saved the video on several media, and took screenshots. He needed Lisa to be unable to deny the obvious. While Lisa was busy making more excuses, Elliot decided to talk to the hotel staff. He cautiously asked if Lisa had been seen with anyone else, and one of the bartenders hinted that he had seen her with a man in the restaurant several times. They would leave the restaurant together and head for the elevator, but the bartender didn't want to create conflict, so he didn't say anything else. Elliot realized that his suspicions were correct. That evening, a fight broke out between Elliot and Lisa. He asked her about her strange behavior, about why she always found a reason to be alone and why her stories kept changing. Lisa, trying to defend herself, began to accuse Elliot of being overly jealous. She said that she just needed space and that his suspicions were a sign of his insecurity. The words became more and more heated, and eventually Lisa, tired of the tension, quit. "I'm going to the bar to relax a little. You are choking me with your questions." When Lisa left, Elliot decided to act. He knew that her words, "I need space," were no longer convincing. Now he had to find out the truth, even if it was painful. Elliot sat in his room, looking at his watch. Lisa had left for the bar over an hour ago, and his suspicions continued to grow. His thoughts revolved around the recent events, Lisa's disappearance, her insincere excuses, the argument before she left. It wasn't just his imagination, something was clearly wrong. Realizing that he couldn't wait any longer, Elliot decided to check what was really going on. He picked up his phone, turned on the voice recorder, and headed for the bar. His steps were fast, his heart was pounding, and the worst-case scenarios were running through his head. When Elliot entered the bar, his eyes immediately searched for Lisa. The soft lighting, loud music, and laughter of the guests created the illusion of serenity. But he quickly spotted her. Lisa was sitting at a table in the corner, with a man in a stylish suit next to her. It was the same man he'd seen on the hidden cameras. They spoke closely, and from time to time Lisa laughed, flirtatiously touching his arm. Elliot stood there, feeling a wave of anger wash over him from head to toe. He had seen it with his own eyes, and now he had no doubt. His wife, the woman he trusted most in the world, was betraying him. Elliot couldn't help himself. He walked over to their table and said loudly, "What's going on here?" Lisa jumped up, looking shocked. Her companion looked calm, even cheekily smiling. "Elliot, what are you doing here?" Lisa said quickly, trying to find an excuse. "What am I doing here? You explain why you're sitting with this man instead of being with your husband on our honeymoon." Lisa tried to say something, but Elliot didn't give her a chance. He turned to the man. "Who are you? What do you want with my wife?" The man just smiled and replied, "Relax, friend. We're just talking. You're being overly dramatic." These words were the last straw. Elliot lost control. He grabbed the man by the collar and forced him to get up from his chair. A fight broke out between them. Lisa screamed, trying to pull them apart, but it was too late. Their fists flew into action, overturning the table and breaking several glasses. The bartender called security, who quickly intervened and separated the men. Elliot and the man were taken out of the bar in different directions. Lisa ran after Elliot, screaming, "It's not what you think. You've got it all wrong." But he wouldn't listen. Anger and frustration overwhelmed him. He said only one thing: "We are done. After this, I can't trust you anymore." He went back to their room, packed his things, and left the keys on the table. For him, the honeymoon was over, and so was their relationship. Lisa remained standing in the hallway, realizing that her actions had ruined what should have been the happiest time of their lives. She tried to text Elliot, but he had blocked her number. Her attempts to justify herself were futile. Elliot returned to New York earlier than planned. He didn't want to deal with Lisa anymore, even though his heart was still hurting from her betrayal. It was a lesson for him about trust and the importance of paying attention to red flags. Elliot returned to his room, his mind in chaos. He didn't want to hear Lisa's explanations or excuses. His heart was beating hard, and his thoughts kept returning to the scene in the bar. He realized that he could no longer trust the woman he once thought was perfect. His hands trembled as he began to pack his things. Every action was difficult for him, as if the suitcase weighed a ton. Lisa stayed in the hallway, watching the closed door. She didn't know how to change the situation or what to say to justify herself. Her mind was in turmoil, but she didn't dare to enter the room. She could only hear Elliot moving around inside, and his every move sounded like a verdict on their marriage. She realized that her actions were irreversible. Elliot left the keys on the table by the door, took one last look around the room, and without hesitation, walked out. He passed Lisa without looking at her. He didn't want to see her cry or feel even worse for her suffering. He just knew it was over for him. Instead of going straight to the reception, however, he headed for the hotel bar. He could not cope with his emotions and decided to drown his pain in drink. Sitting at the bar, Elliot ordered several cocktails, trying to drown out his frustration and anger. Alcohol gave him short-term relief, but each sip only reinforced his thoughts about Lisa's betrayal. He remembered their happy moments, their wedding, their promises to love each other forever. But now it all seemed like empty words. Several other bar patrons tried to strike up a conversation with him, but Elliot ignored them. His world narrowed down to the glass in his hand and the thoughts that were tearing him apart from the inside. At some point, he felt that even alcohol wasn't helping, and that made him wonder how he could move on. After a few hours at the bar, Elliot decided that he could no longer stay in that hotel. His decision was final. He went up to the front desk, asked to book an early flight, and went back to his room to get his things. After he left, Lisa was left alone. She returned to the room, which now seemed empty and cold. Anything that reminded her of their honeymoon was now a source of pain and shame. Her phone lay on the table, littered with unread messages from friends and family congratulating them on their marriage. But now each of those messages was just a reminder of what she had destroyed. Meanwhile, Elliot got into a taxi to the airport. He looked out the window, oblivious to the world around him. His thoughts returned to the moments in their relationship when he had sincerely believed that they were made for each other. Now it all seemed like an illusion. He knew that returning home would not be easy, but he could not stay with Lisa any longer. After arriving in New York, Elliot decided not to share the details of his failed honeymoon with friends or family. He avoided questions, citing fatigue from the trip. His inner pain remained invisible to others, but he felt it in every little thing, in looking at his wedding photos and messages he no longer wanted to open. Lisa stayed at the hotel for a few more days. She tried to understand how and why things had gone so far. She wrote messages to Elliot, but they remained unread. Her feelings of guilt grew stronger and stronger, and she realized that she had lost a man who had truly loved her. These few days became a lesson for both of them. For Elliot, it was about the importance of not ignoring warning signs in a relationship. For Lisa, it was about realizing the consequences of her actions. Her impulsiveness and addiction to attention destroyed what could have been their happy future. After returning home, Elliot began to slowly rebuild his life. The honeymoon, which was supposed to be a symbol of a new happy chapter, left a deep scar. He tried to avoid talking about the trip, avoided meeting friends who might ask uncomfortable questions. In the first days after his return, he focused on work, trying to fill the void left by Lisa's betrayal. Every day seemed endless, but he decided not to let the pain get the better of him. Elliot deleted all the photos from his honeymoon, packed the wedding mementos in a box, and hid it in the farthest corner of his house. He blocked Lisa's number so that he wouldn't receive messages from her that would cause even more pain. But despite all these attempts, her image continued to haunt his thoughts. He often asked himself how he could not notice the signals that now seemed obvious. This question ate away at him, forcing him to constantly rethink their path together. Lisa stayed at the hotel for a few more days, but it was no longer a vacation. She sat in an empty room, surrounded by silence that pressed on her chest. Her attempts to justify herself to Elliot were fruitless. She wrote him long messages, but they remained unread. Deep down, she realized that she had lost his trust forever. When Lisa returned to New York, she was met with a reality that was much harsher than the silence in the hotel. She had lost not only her husband, but also a part of herself. Lisa decided to see a therapist to understand why she had ruined what could have been a happy future. Her therapy sessions were the first steps towards understanding her impulses and trying to correct her own mistakes. Elliot, meanwhile, started playing sports and attending support groups for people who had experienced betrayal. This helped him not only to find like-minded people, but also to realize that he was not alone in this pain. In these groups, he heard stories that reminded him that life can go on, even if trust has been broken. A few months later, Elliot received an offer of a secondment to California. It was a chance for a change of scenery and to leave the past behind. He accepted, and the move became a symbol of a new beginning for him. In California, he began to build his life from scratch, meeting new people and gradually opening himself up to new relationships. Lisa, on the other hand, remained in New York. She lived a quiet life, avoiding the hustle and bustle in a large social circle. Her attempts to correct her mistakes did not work, but she learned to take responsibility for her actions. She realized that trust is a fragile foundation that is easy to destroy but almost impossible to rebuild. The story of Elliot and Lisa ended without reconciliation. Their marriage was a painful lesson for both of them. Elliot realized that love cannot exist without trust, and Lisa realized that her impulsiveness and dependence on attention had a price. The end of this story was not happy, but it was a new beginning for both of them. Elliot moved on, ready for a new life, while Lisa was left with thoughts of what she had lost and the hope of someday finding peace in her soul.